Hello, welcome to the Q. And for the first installment of Combat Theater, we're going to be looking at the Axis and Allies Pacific game. And this is not the current Pacific game that you hook up with Europe to play global. This game was the third game in the series. The second game was Axis and Allies Europe, which, if memory serves me right, was 1999. And then this one came out the next year, or maybe it was 2001. So they were separate games by themselves. And, you know, it was a catchy name here, from Pearl Harbor to victory. So I guess they're implying that the Allies won the war. And if you look at the cover art here, it sure looks like the Japanese are taking a beating. But I will say on that cover art, that might be, you know, one of my favorite. You know, you've got the collage usually on the Axis and Allies games of different events in the war, which is kind of neat, but this is pretty cool from a historical perspective. And then, of course, here, 345 historically accurate pieces, so I won't get into that again. But I picked it up on eBay for $30, and it did not have a rule book. So I had to go to their website and just print one off. So it's just regular paper, and no big deal. I can make that work. Propaganda there, and even though the game was used, it doesn't look like it was really played. You know, I mean, there's your setup cards and a battle tracker, but you can see none of these roundels were punched out. So I think I'll just use my roundels and leave those alone. And here's the income tracker. And I haven't looked at the rules yet. I'll probably do that after this video before I start playing the game, which, you know, was going to be helpful. Victory points for Japan. So you must be tracking the victory points. So it looks like if you get to 22 being red, I'm going to assume that's the victory. Kamikazes over here, so that must be when they introduced kamikazes to the game, because I know in the classic game that's not there. Like I said, I don't know that it's ever been played. These here aren't even punched out. And all the units, though, however, some dice, are in Ziplocs, so it's like they were played. You can see one of the other new units for this game. Does that show up? Oh, it's you can't tell because of the glare on there and how they look. They have Marines, so you have your regular infantry, you know, with the regular green color, and I'm sure these are the Marines, the dark green. So that's a new unit for this game, which is kind of interesting, and that one's not a unit that carried forward in the latter games. So I'm looking to see what else is in here. The destroyer, I think that's new for this game as well. I'll have to look at the, well, where is that sheet here? See if it says cost movements. Yeah, attack and defense. So your destroyer down here. Well, that's interesting. The destroyer attacks and defends at a 3. So the submarine is still like the classic, which I like. It attacks at 2, but it defends at 2. I always hated that they switched that that defense roll to 1 on that sub. So what else is on here? Submarine, destroyer, that's what's new. Artillery would be new as well. And it looks like it's the 2 with, it boosts 1 infantry. So like I said, I'll get into the rules. Got some chips. Well, here's something interesting that I didn't know was in this game, and it's task force markers. So my assumption is you'll put this on the, I guess I should take it out of the stinking bag because of that glare. But you can put these out on the board, you know, and the roundel just slips in there. And then it goes to the corresponding, you know, number sheet, and I guess this is where you would put your units. So my assumption is that's for the Navy, but I don't know if there's enough land forces to go into that or not. But comes with money, never been opened. And the British, I like that dark color for the British. And I guess these Russians that are in this bag, is that too glary? Yeah, it is. Trust me, there's Russians in the bag here, and they are, I'm going to guess they're the Chinese, because I don't think Russia is in this game. And then the interesting part here is the Japanese went from that sun yellow, I guess, or golden yellow to red. So that'll be interesting to play with those, I guess. That's different. And I probably should just get all this out of the way. And we'll take a look at this map. Alright, slide you out of the way, box. And it's a one-piece, one-board map, I should say. And it flips open, and I'm sure that's not all in view. Let me look at the camera. No, I got to widen that out. Alright, so there we go. There is the map, and it basically looks just like the European, or the later second edition Pacific. Well, maybe not. There's no part of Russia up here. So interesting, you've got air base and a naval base. So that is new for this game, you know, added to Axis and Allies. USA up here for $55. So they're going to have a pretty big income compared to Japan at $5, plus some other territories. I'm going to guess Anzac's at $5, India's at $5. You know what? I didn't see different units for those, so maybe they're a combined force there. I don't know. Like I said, I'll have to get the rules and go through those to see what the differences are. And I will get back with the next video being the setup. And I'll probably just stitch all these videos together so it's just one video to watch. So it might be a long video, but you'll get the gist of the game and the setup and some gameplay. And I will cut it off for here and then get it set up and look at some rules. Okay, so we got the game set up, and I wanted to say in advance that if you remember back from my intro video, I bought the original game, you know, like the second it came out, and played that for quite a while, and then the game went up on the shelf, you know, wife, kids, you know, everyone's getting families and taking jobs all over the country, and you know, all that kind of thing. So our group kind of broke up, and it wasn't until, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, gosh, maybe 6 or 7 now, that I discovered there were other Axis and Allies games. So I bought that second edition Europe, second edition Pacific for Global. So all the games between the classic in the 80s to the second edition, you know, Europe Pacific, I missed. Didn't even know they existed. So this being one of the games, never played it before. So like I said, there's going to be some things that maybe I'll do on the game board for the gameplay that won't make sense maybe to people that are seasoned veterans of this game. But this is my first look at it, my first play. So like I said, I got things set up and wanted to go through a couple things that I thought were interesting and unique maybe to this game. The starting income, you know, for Japan at 19. Wow, that really, you know, you've got Anzac, or yeah, I guess we'll call it Anzac, at 20, and then Britain there at 15. And then of course US, which, you know, 75, so that's like a global game where the US goes 100% Pacific, you know, on its builds. I realize Japan will capture some points right off the bat, but that's a huge deficit, and we'll see how the game plays out and how that really affects the game. But my first thought was, whew, I don't want to play Japan. And then another thing here on the income tracker, there was a Union Jack roundel, and I thought, well, maybe there's like alternative rules or something. But what it is, and I think this is in the viewfinder, yeah, they're convoy boxes that are squares, and those are actually additional income for the UK. So Britain gets the 15, Anzac gets the 20. They both go at the same time, just like, you know, in a global game, you have UK Pacific and UK Europe all going at the same time. They have two different builds. But in addition to that, you have these 12 extra dollars that you can split up for your purchases. You know, you can give all 12 to India or Britain there in India, or split it 6 and 6, however you need to. So each one of these boxes, they're called the British convoy boxes, gives them an additional 12. So not only are they starting at 19 and everyone else is you know, way above it, we're going to add an extra 12. And, you know, maybe there's a reason for that mechanic. We'll see, but I'll discuss those boxes when we look at the map a little closer. The other thing, the kamikazes are introduced in this game. Obviously, in the Europe game that came out before this, there would be no need for that. But they have 6, and they are just like the standard ones you see today, you know, roll it 2. And they have specific zones on the map for that. The turn order I laid out for myself just because, like I said, I've never played this before. The victory points. So on setting up the map, I'm looking around and it's like I don't really see any victory points, but you know, reading the rule book, at the end of Japan's turn, for every 10 IPCs that they have, they get 1 victory point. So if the turn ended now at 19, they only get 1. So the goal, I think, for Japan is to be above that 20, 30, 40 mark at all times to get maximum points. Because, you know, when they reach 22, that's a victory, or I think one of the other victory conditions was if Japan takes one of the capitals, which, well, you have to look at the map for that. Let me slide the tripod over here and line things up so we can see the map. I'm going to have to zoom out a little here. Alright, well, we still don't have the map in there completely. Back up a little. Alright, so there is your map. I've marked some interesting things with the yellow chips, and we'll start with that convoy box. So there's 3 convoy boxes for Britain that make up the 12 points. A 5 here, 4, and a 3. And they will collect those dollars as long as those are those convoy zones are open. Japan can close them by moving a ship there, and it places a roundel there. Now they're down $5. You move that convoy marker down $5. So that stays that way until an allied ship can move into this sea zone and clear it. Another interesting thing is, too, if this ship was here in 16 and it went 15, where's the sea zone? 14. So if it drove, sailed through that, it would also claim that sea zone as well. So, interesting way to do convoying. It's kind of like a reverse convoying, that these convoy zones give the Allies money until they're taken or convoyed, so to speak. There are some other convoy markers by certain land zones, and say Japan doesn't attack Celebes but moves a ship in there, they automatically lose whatever that dollar amount. So that would be 1. So there's no rolling for convoys. It's just if a Axis ship is in one of these zones with the markers, and I think there's one there too, yeah, then those respective countries go down on their income tracker by that dollar amount. So it's an automatic convoy. There are 2 different bases here. There is a air base and a naval base, and they don't work quite like the global version, where, you know, Europe and Pacific, the second or the first edition. So we'll put a plane here on this air base, and what that air base does for you is it eliminates the need to count this sea zone as your first space. Now the requirement is that you land on another airbase. So if we were going to attack, say, New Britain, we don't count this sea zone, and that island is all one space for flight purposes. So that's 1, 2, you make your attack, 3, 4, you land. So it's for the takeoff and landing, this whole zone is 1. So it helps with island assaults, because a lot of times, you know, you wouldn't be able to do that on a normal game, even with a regular airbase, because basically it's turning this plane into a 6 from a 4 movement. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, in a normal game, they would only be able to move 5 with an airbase there, so they couldn't make that attack. So that's kind of interesting. You have to land back at an airbase. The naval bases are different. They have no effect in combat, but if you are in non-combat move, see, where's one that's 3 away? Let me find one. Okay, so say New Britain is 3 away from Hawaii, and Hawaii has a naval base. So in the non-com, you can go from naval base to naval base as long as you own it. So 1, 2, 3. So that's going to get you to the front line faster, not on the attack side, but on the non-com. So, you know, reinforcing. So that's kind of critical for the U.S. And maybe Japan too, for getting stuff out of Japan, since they can only build in Japan because they're not allowed to build factories. So everything that Japan does has to come out of Japan proper. The other thing that is interesting is if this naval base was Japanese, and say one of these transports came down, you know, movement of 2, takes it, then another ship on non-com can use that as a friendly naval base and reinforce it, you know, moving 3. So I do like that aspect. That's kind of cool. Move this plane there. Well, I'm trying to remember where the plane was. Speaking of planes, the units for the U.S. came with 2 different fighters, which I thought was pretty cool. Came with a Hellcat and the P-38, and typically the Hellcats were carrier based. So that I really like that, just because I like different sculpts. So it's the first time I've seen actually 2 different sculpts for one unit, and it's only on the U.S. All the others are similar. So that's kind of cool. There is an industrial complex in Hawaii, and I thought maybe when it was there, usually in an Axis and Allies game, you can only place the number of units to the value of the territory. I can't find that in the rules here. Maybe I'm missing it, but so can U.S. put all 75 points right here? Holy cow, that's pretty painful. I'm going to give that one more look before I start gameplay. But I can see where that wouldn't be effect, because Japan, Tokyo, is only 5. So you're saying that Japan can only place 5 units per turn? That can't be right. Not only are they a little low on income, they can't build a factory, and they can only place 5 units a turn. I can't believe that's correct, but I'm still going to take a peek. The other thing here, you've got a darker colored infantry, and I think I went over that in the previous segment, is a Marine. So the Marines actually, when they amphibious assault, they attack at 2. So you don't need artillery paired with a Marine to bring it to 2. It automatically attacks at 2. And then if you're using the Marine in regular infantry role, you know, in a regular land battle, they attack like a normal infantry, you know, at 1, and can be boosted by the artillery at 2. This I marked because I don't know why all the maps, they basically divide New Guinea. Sometimes it's just one section, and sometimes it's just split down the middle. But historically, this was the battle. You know, Japan, they came in, they took the Dutch New Guinea, they were on the north side of New Guinea. There's a mountain range that runs right down here, and it's a pretty high mountain range, high enough that a lot of times it was shrouded in fog, and Allied and Japanese planes as well would just run into the side of the mountain because they thought they were high enough, and misread it. I don't know why you couldn't use your gauges, or maybe you just didn't think the mountain was that close. Who knows? But what this sets up here, Rabaul is this naval base here, and Japan would send troops over the mountains, and Australia they came up to defend this part of New Guinea, and that battle ran for quite a long time, and Japan never was able to capture Rabaul. Is it Rabaul? No, it's Port Moresby. Rabaul's over here on the island, so it's Port Moresby, to say it right. So that was a big battle. So the map is actually set up, and that has really nothing to do with other than it's historical, and I kind of like it. So that's why I marked that. Japanese destroyers, and they do this in the Global War 36 game. You can actually bring one infantry and do an amphibious invasion, or transport one infantry, I guess. So that's a big bonus, and that is also historical because Japan attacked so many places in the opening 6, 7 months, 8 months of the war that they couldn't possibly have had enough transport ships. So they were throwing guys on destroyers and just dropping them off. It was a big shock because no one expected Japan to attack that many places at once. The British pieces are kind of a darker tan, and I just had spray painted my Anzac units that I'll come back here and give them that stain weather to make them, show more detail. But it's fairly close to that the stain or the darkness of these British units, because usually they're like a light tan. So, and that has nothing to do with the game. I just thought that was interesting. Get my pieces out of there. What else is here? Okay, so the next chip, there is a combat air patrol that you can place your fighters on, and in your non-com move, if a plane hasn't moved, it can move into the adjacent sea zone and go on combat air patrol. And that works two ways. It's basically the forerunner of the air base where you could scramble. So he stays there until the beginning of the next turn when he can land. And he can only land in the territory, one space away. The thing that might be different is if he scrambled here or went on combat air patrol here, he could also land there. So it's just the adjacent. So what that does is if you had a ship here in Borneo, it immediately stops any ship and there's combat. So if you wanted to protect this transport that was alone there, you could put your plane out like that, and then now there's a scramble, basically a fight with a transport and fighter defending against that destroyer, which actually was up here. Put it back where it belongs. Alright, so it kind of works like an airbase scramble, but you actually have to physically put it out there, so there's no, which is kind of a good deal because now there's going to be a scramble. You don't have to wonder, oh, will there be a scramble? It's there or it's not. If it's on land, there is no CAP, so that goes away. The setup, there's nothing in Siam. I thought that was kind of odd on the front line there. China is worked differently. Yeah, you can see that. It's way up at the top. China does not collect income because all of these territories are worth nothing. So there's not a huge incentive for Japan to go into China in this game, other than you obviously want to whittle China down. China has two territories that are worth a point. Sichuan and Saikang. If they own both of those, they get 1 infantry each. If the Burma Road is open, then they get a 3rd infantry. So the max China can get each turn is 3 infantry per turn. All of them must be placed here at a Chinese factory, which is also different. So China works a little differently. Like I said, there's not a lot of incentive for Japan to attack China that I can see right off the bat, other than just whittling down the Chinese horde there. And the last item is there is a special first round attack for Japan. Now when I opened or set up this game and I'm looking at it and thinking, holy cow, Japan has $19 and there are allied stuff everywhere. How can they possibly get an advantage and get something going here? Well, on turn one, it's basically a surprise attack on the allies. So all allied units except China, because they're already at war with Japan, so there's no surprise there. All allied units defend at 1. So that is huge, because now you don't quite need as many forces as you originally thought to hit certain things. So I don't think that sub was there. I think it was here in Marshall's. So these 4 ships that normally would defend at 2 4s, a 3, and a 1, all 4 defend at 1. So that's going to be a good deal for Japan to get them up and going. So, and that only lasts, it's the first round, all the battles. So, you know, turn 2, and there's really not a turn tracker here. I think you just play until Tokyo falls or Japan gets one of the 2 victory options. So I think that's all for the interesting things I had marked on the map. I will pull off and get things ready, because I'm going to have to look at sea zones, because I'm not familiar with the map, and see what the best attacks are. And I will set that up and film Japan turn 1, and then from there on we'll just do recaps, as opposed to, you know, watching me fumble around the map on a game I've never played before. So I will get that set up, and then we will film turn 1 and the rolls, and you can kind of get an idea of that first surprise attack turn for Japan, which I gotta admit sounds pretty fun. When I read that in the rules, you know, last night before going to bed, I was like, oh, so there's the equalizer that kind of gets Japan going, you know, gets them started, you know, to try and match. Well, they'll never match the U.S. income, but maybe they can punish Britain and Anzac enough that they can somehow pull out a victory. And like I said, I was reading the rule book right before I went to bed. That was a big mistake, because actually at that point I wanted to just come down and start playing. So let me get things set up for Japan turn 1 battle, and we'll see you then.